Well, Dr. Briley, what was your background before you came to this area?
Well, I qualified in London in 1946, and I worked in various hospitals round about London and did my army service between 1946 and 1954, when I came here almost directly from hospitals, working in various hospitals at that time. I did 6 months in Cornwall before I came here, but it wasn't a very big practice, and it wasn't big enough for 2 people, so we heard of this practice from Bath, my hospital, and we came here for an interview and succeeded in being appointed. There was a big rush to get into general practice then, and I think there were 70 applicants, and I suppose I was the only one whose face fitted, so I came here.
And who did the interviewing?
Oh well, the two existing partners, that was Dr. McMichael, who lived at Vowchurch, and Dr. Shuttleworth, who lived at Grosvenor.
I believe that Dr. McMichael and his father had been around for
quite
some time.
Dr. McMichael took over the practice from his father when he retired in 1933. His father arrived at Vowchurch in 1896, and to set up his own practice. There was no existing practice there, and he said that he arrived in the middle of the epidemic of diphtheria, and he was going around these houses, and it wasn't uncommon to find 2 people dead in the house at the same time from diphtheria. So I mean, you can imagine what that was like. I mean, one would never experience that in practice unless there'd been some sort of accident. And then he established the practice, and he for a long time he had a motorcycle and sidecar that he used to go around on. And then I think after the First War he got a motor car, and he built the house to the croft at Vowchurch. He bought a small cottage and then built onto it. And Dr. McMichael was in the Royal Flying Corps during the war, forced down during the war, shot down really, and he was taken prisoner in Austria. He was kept prisoner of war throughout the war, and then at the end of the war he returned to Barts and did completed his training. Anyhow, he stayed there until he qualified about 1923, I think, and then he took a practice. After doing some house jobs in London, he took a practice at Much Birch. He lived there and operated from that practice until his father retired in 1933, and then he moved to Vowchurch. And I joined him in 1954.
I think you said that Dr. Shuttleworth and Dr. McMichael actually wanted a 3rd doctor to help.
Yes, there were 2 separate practices, one at Vowchurch and one at Grosvenor. Dr. McMichael at Vowchurch, Dr. Shuttleworth at Grosvenor, and they were completely separate practices. But when the National Health Service came into being in 1948, they found that the workload was too much for 2 men, but it wasn't enough for 4. So they agreed to join practices and take a 3rd partner in. And they had somebody for a year. Well, they had two assistants for about 2 years, but they couldn't get on with them very well, and they left. They took me on, and I stayed here as an assistant for 12 months, and then they made me a partner.
I believe this is one of the largest practices in the country.
Geographically, it's the 2nd largest in England. Not in Wales or Scotland, but in England it was the 2nd largest geographically, but not numerically, of course. We had about 5,000 patients, of which about 4,000 were in Herefordshire, and 1,500 were in Monmouthshire. And of those, Dr. McMichael's were all in Hereford. No, he didn't have any patients in Monmouthshire, but Dr. Shuttleworth had a good half of his patients were in Monmouth and half in Hereford. And you'd like to know about the surgeries?
Yes, because
yes.
obviously it must be people to travel.
There were two main surgeries at Dr. McMichael's end of the practice, namely Vowchurch and Longtown. And the surgery at Vowchurch, you had a surgery twice a day there, roughly. And it was attached to Dr. McMichael's house, the Croft. And then he also had a branch surgery in Longtown. And so when I moved here, I gradually took over the branch surgery up at this house, and we did the branch surgeries here, and I, of course, went to other parts of the practice to do surgeries. There were only 2 surgeries a week in Longtown, and we'd have about, as I say, about 2 surgeries every day. Now, Dr. Shuttleworth was a different setup, really. He had a main surgery in Grosmont, where he saw patients every day, at least once every day. And then he had a whole series of what we call front room surgeries. And there was a front room surgery on the main road in Pontrilas. Yes. There was a front room surgery at Wormbridge. There was a front room surgery at Galway Hill, Galway, Norton, and Pandy. And so we used to just appear at an agreed time, whenever it was in the day. Any particular day we were due to go, we had an agreed time, and we would arrive about 10 o'clock or 11, whatever it was. And the patients would just turn up as they needed, and would see them. The only trouble is there were no sort of facilities for examining them. You could only just sort of do a stand-up examination, and there was no couch or anything like that. That's in these front room surgery. Yeah. And so if we needed to do an abdominal examination, so they were lying down, we had to sort of say, well, you better go home and I'll come round and see you, or can you get to the surgery tomorrow night in Grosmont, or something like that. And of course we had to carry all our treatment with us. And what I did was I had a whole lot of tablets in my case, which was enough to keep me going for the day. And I would count them out and put them in these little wage packets, buff envelopes, which we used to fill up. Well, I put them in those and count them up and tell them, give them instructions how they could take them. Then we also, of course, they like medicines. They much preferred medicine. And so we had a series of, I had a special case made, a box, with medicine bottles in one side and the mixtures, concentrated mixtures, in the other. So you were able to empty, say, 2 ounces of the concentrated mixture into the bottle, and then make it up with tap water to fill the bottle up. And then they were able then to have an 8-ounce bottle of medicine, which would last them 5 or 6 days. And as I said, they had great faith in the medicine, and they liked to have it. But of course, gradually over the years, we went over onto tablets and got stronger and better medicines and drugs and things like that, which they gradually realised were much better for them than the medicine. The only thing I will say is that Dr. Michael had a stomach medicine which was made of bismuth. Bismuth was a well-known stomach medicine. It was used widely, but at that time they were the people who were in the know in London thought you should just use an ordinary alkali. So a lot of people had stomach problems in those days because they were really gastric ulcers, and they were incurable. And they had great faith in this bismuth mixture, which he used to make up with bismuth powder and sort of a little tincture called chlorodyne. And they liked it. And I used to go away and move off to various parts of Herefordshire, and they'd still come back with this medicine. So I couldn't really understand why they should like this medicine so much. But of course, as the years have gone by, the Australians have done a lot of work on stomach ulcers, and they found that there was a germ that was able to live in the stomach called Helicobacter pylori. And of course, bismuth is an antiseptic. So it was actually helping, but it didn't cure them, but it did help them.
Yes.
And the Australians didn't find it. It was found out, it was discovered in Australia, and it wasn't found until about in the 1980s. So they were well in advance in some ways.
Were there other times of the year when you didn't get many call-outs?
Oh yes, we used to get call-outs to do sometimes for injuries, and quite a lot of stitching I did in the kitchen there on the dining room table, and all with oil lamps, of course, because for many, when we first came to this house, there was no mains electricity, although they did have it at Grosmont and Vowchurch, and Ewyas Harold, of course. But all the outlying rural parts of the practice were all without electricity, and they had to light their houses with either paraffin lamps or candles. And I was often asked to visit people who'd fallen and sew them up in the kitchen. And of course we had to manage with paraffin lamps and that sort of thing. I was also asked to treat animals. I remember once a lady who kept greyhounds, didn't want to pay the vet, came over with a greyhound, had got a cut on it, and more or less coerced me into stitching it up so she could get out of pain the vet's bill. But then another time, I had a patient came to me on Galway Hill, and she said, "I wonder if you know what could be wrong with our milking cow." And she said it was all right until about 3 months ago, and then it developed a cough, and it's sort of gone losing weight and it's coughing. And so from what she described, I thought the cow probably had an unresolved pneumonia. And at that time, there was an antibiotic called chloromycetin, which was very good for whooping cough in children. But there'd been reports of this particular drug causing blood problems. So I had to stop using it because, although I had no patients with any trouble, it was reported, and so we stopped using it. So I thought, well, I've got all these chloromycetin capsules, and this cow needs them. So I worked out the dosage by weight, roughly the weight of the cow, and worked out how many capsules would be needed. So we'll break these capsules up and take the powder out and mix it with a bit of bran mash and put it in and give it to the cow for about 6 days. So which she did. And the chloromycin was no good anyway because I couldn't use it. So the cow had this chloromycin, and about 2 months later she turned up at the surgery and said, "Oh, that cow has made a marvellous recovery." And she brought me a chicken for Christmas.
Hello, this is an interview with Mr. Nigel Carter, the retired vet. You got him into the Black Mountain area quite often.
Oh yes, yeah. And in the early days, of course, in the early 50s, a trip out from Hereford into the Black Mountains was quite an excursion. One went from traditional farming in the lowlands almost into a sort of almost a hilly-billy area. a trip out there in the evening, for instance, would involve quite a lot on the farmer's part. The first thing that would happen on your arrival was, come in while I light the tilly. And then you would want some water. Oh well, we'll put the kettle on the fire. So after quite a long interval, you could start work. But the thing that always struck me was a trip to Brassnall. Commander Bosenjet was living at Brassnall at that time, and I went out one evening and I got to the top of Longtown and not quite sure of the way, so I stopped a motorist who was approaching from the opposite direction, and he gave me directions to Brassnall, and he said, don't forget to fasten all the gates. And of course that was Robert Newton, who lived in the Alton Valley, or had a drinking den there, I should say. Well, that was an adventure in itself. There were 8 gates before you got to Brassnall, so you were in and out of the car 16 times going and 16 times coming back, 32 times in all. But the thing that always mystified me by this was the fact that I could go in there and wash in their bathroom with hot water, no problems. I'd come back into Hereford, into 8 King Street, and the only way of heating water there was on the stove, on the gas stove, with a kettle. We had a geyser in the bathroom, but apart from that, any hot water you wanted, in the middle of Hereford, could be boiled on the gas stove. And I could go out to Brassnall and I could walk into a bathroom and have hot running water, and it didn't seem right at all.